Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and welcome back to Jumah Nights. I want to thank you first of all for all the positive feedback that we've received online, and make sure that you keep on sending in your comments and any suggestions that you have for the show. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe down below, and if you don't know what's going on yet, make sure you check out last week's episode where you got to know me a little bit, and over the last few days, alhamdulillah, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you. So today we're going to be covering two sections of a conversation. The first of them is, as I said, we're going to be having a series about Imam al-Hujjah alayhi salatu wasalam, and we're going to be talking about why it's so important to know the details, the fine details about our Imam and his birth. In the second section of the conversation, we're going to be talking about wokeism as a vast topic. So that refers to a lot of the ideologies and movements that we see around the world today. Some call it the leftist movement, some just refer to it as liberalism, and some people like to feel or think that a lot of these ideologies are completely compatible with Islam, and others say that they're not compatible at all. But we're going to be discussing it in further detail later on, so make sure you stay tuned, and let's get straight into the first section, which is about Imam al-Hujjah. So over the past few years, we've had a lot of questions with regards to the Imam of our time. At first, we used to only get them from outside of our community, from sects outside of Shi'ism, where they were questioning the existence of our Imam. I'm sure that you've seen these debates online in Arabic and in English and in Urdu. There's a lot of people online questioning the existence of our 12th Imam, but we would have never thought that this would have come into our communities as well. But now, unfortunately, as time goes on, each of our communities, the Arab communities, the Pakistani communities, and the Hajj communities, are coming across more and more people in our own communities who are asking these same questions. And there's a lot of confusion amongst us as youth. When we see this video and we see someone, for example, say that there are no authentic narrations about the birth of our Imam, there are no individuals that witnessed the birth of our Imam, or where is the Imam? What is the Imam doing right now? And that's why I think it's really important that we focus on the Imam of our time, understanding our responsibilities towards him. And today we want to talk a little bit about his birth. So, first of all, as Shia, how do we know that we should believe in a 12th Imam? And how do we know that, therefore, he was definitely born, if we don't have any authentic narrations, as some people are saying? As Shia, we had 12 Imams. So we started off with Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, and we had 10 Imams after him telling us about the 12th Imam. So we started off with principles. We have principles that are so strongly founded in the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam that we have believed in from the first Imam coming up to the 12th Imam. So an example of that is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there's going to be 12 Imams after me. We know for sure that there was to be 12 Imams. Another concept like that is the concept of two ghaibas, two occultations. And we know that also from the Imams that came before, that had to happen. For example, there are some narrations that you find from the 6th Imam talking about the first occultation and the second occultation, to the extent some of the sects that broke off from the Ithna Ashariya, like the Waqifa, for example, used these narrations to prove that Imam al-Kadhim was the Mahdi. So that proves that these narrations about the ghaibas, the first and second occultation, already existed at the time of the Imams alayhi salatu wasalam. Another principle that we find strongly in the narrations is that Imamah passes from father to son after the Imamah of Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. So when we have these principles established, we've got three principles that I've just mentioned now. The fact that there's going to be 12 Imams, that the Imamah passes from father to son, and the idea that there's going to be a first and a second occultation. These three principles are enough that have been proven already from the previous Imams to tell you that there's definitely going to be a 12th Imam, and an Imam that we believe in as the 12th Imam. So the idea that there's an issue with the history of a specific narration about the birth, it becomes almost irrelevant. to know the specific details when you know that we have always believed as Shia that there are going to be 12 Imams, and that 12th Imam is going to have two occultations, and that the Imam is going to be the son of the 11th Imam, Imam Hassan al-Askari. And why are there so many questions about the birth of our Imam? As Shia, we already know that the Imam was born in such secretive circumstances. So Imam al-Askari والسلام, lived in very difficult situation. He was living under the Abbasid Caliphate, and it got to the point where it's mentioned in some of the narrations that Imam al-Askari told his companions that when I'm called to the Abbasid court and I come outside, and this is, you have to bear in mind, yeah, for the Shia, sometimes this is the first time they're seeing the Imam in weeks, yeah. So the Shia, they come out, they're seeing their Imam dressed, going to the Abbasid court. Which one of us would not want to at least speak to the Imam or smile at the Imam or get a smile from the Imam? That's what all the Shia wanted to do. But Imam al-Askari tells them, he says, when you come out to see me, don't even look in my direction. Don't even smile at me. Don't even make any movements that may link you towards me. So the Imam of that time is living in a proper dangerous situation. He doesn't want his Shia to be in danger. He doesn't want his imamah and his message to be in danger. So the Imam at that time, he's really emphasized on the idea of this being a secretive period. And that leads on to the context in which the Imam of our time, Imam al-Hujjah, was born. And that's why there are so many questions about his birth. Look at what Imam al-Askari does. We're going to read a short story from Kamaluddin wa Tamam wa Ni'mah by Sheikh al-Saduq, who died in the year 381 after Hijrah. Some scholars also called this book Ikmaluddin wa Itmam al-Ni'mah. And this is the book here for the side camera. So if we go to page 390, we have the story narrated by Sayyidah Hakima. Sayyidah Hakima was the daughter of Imam al-Jawad. So Imam al-Askari invites Hakima over to his house for the night of the birth of our Imam. Why does Imam al-Askari do that? He wants there to be a witness for this story. He wants there to be someone to tell this story. And that's why he's called her over. Sayyidah Hakima, by the way, was someone that was very close to the Imam of our time, even after he was born. And she was an elderly lady as well at this point. And Imam Hassan al-Askari, he tells his aunt, he says, tonight I want you to have iftar with us, and I want you to pray here. And it was the night of the 15th of Sha'ban, as you all know. Imam al-Askari says to his aunt that on this night, Allah is going to reveal His Hujjah on His earth. So she asks, who's going to be the mother? Imam al-Askari says it's going to be Narjis. And Sayyidah Hakima says, I don't see any signs of pregnancy on her. So this is showing that the secretive nature of it, the miraculous nature of the Imam's birth, that Allah did not show any signs of pregnancy on her body. The same way that Prophet Musa's mother didn't have any signs of pregnancy before his birth. And that was also at a secretive, dangerous time. You know what? The best thing about this book is that Sheikh al-Saduq, he actually narrates a lot of stories from the previous prophets and takes lessons from their lives and shows the parallel nature of the stories in the Quran to the lives of our Imams. And that was actually one of the purposes of the stories of the prophets in the Quran, to show us and to prepare us for that which happens with the 12th Imam. And specifically with regards to his ghaiba, Sheikh al-Saduq has written a lot of narrations here comparing to the past previous prophets. So if we continue with the story, Sayyidah Hakima says, so when I finished Salat al-Isha, I had my iftar, and I sat and I looked at Sayyidah Narjis, and I saw that she was sleeping and she still had no signs of pregnancy. So Imam al-Askari tells her, don't worry, at the time of Fajr, the Imam's going to be born. So Sayyidah Hakima, she sits there, she sees that the time of Fajr has come, and she says that I still saw Sayyidah Narjis there, and she was sleeping, and I could still not see any signs of pregnancy. And this is at Fajr time, right? So this is when the Imam said that he was going to be born. So Sayyidah Hakima says, I had my doubts. Like at this point, I was thinking, is this really going to happen or is it not going to happen? But obviously, as she had her doubts, she heard a voice from outside of the room of Imam al-Askari telling her that the time is near now, it's coming. The narration mentions that Sayyidah Hakima at this point, there comes a distraction, so it's such that she's not able to focus on Sayyidah Narjis. And when she regains her focus, she sees that Sayyidah Narjis takes away the cover and she's holding a baby in her hands, and it is none other than Imam al-Hujjah alayhi salatu wassalam. At this point, the narration says that Imam al-Askari, he enters the room, he takes Imam al-Hujjah into his arms, and he says to his son, speak. As we know from the narrations of the previous births of the Imams usually speak when they are born, the same way that Nabi Isa spoke in the cradle. And this is again another link to the stories of the prophets. And Imam al-Hujjah, his first words in this narration are, he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then the narration says, ثُمَّ صَلَّى عَلَى أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَعَلَى الْأَئِمَّةِ. So the narration says that he bore witness that Allah, there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is Rasulullah, and he sent blessings upon Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam and the Imams that came after him. This is a narration that's mentioned in one of our most classical books by Shaykh al-Saduq, and is one of the most detailed narrations with regards to the birth of our Imam. What we find in the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam is that the birth of Imam al-Hujjah was the beginning of Akhir al-Zaman, what we call the end of times. And that's the times that we are living in today. The beginning of Akhir al-Zaman, to mark the beginning of a new path for the Shi'a, a new path that they need to prepare for. And it is none other than the grand Mahdawi path. Alright, so let's speak about this tweet here. My uncle in Pakistan asked me what woke means, and I told him what it meant. His response: these people in the West are spoilt and have never had real problems, so they're creating problems because they're so bored. Okay, so what is wokeism? From a Western perspective, the youngers might have heard this term used a lot, used on social media. They might be using it in school. We've seen so many different movements. We've seen BLM, we've seen the climate change movement and other social justice campaigns online. Some of the elders might not be too familiar with this term woke. People usually use this term to describe people that are politically aware with regards to things like gender equality, racism, and other forms of discrimination that exist. So when does wokeness become a problem? For a lot of Muslim youth, we grow up a little bit confused. When we hear about all these different ideologies, things like BLM, right? Or things like gender inequality campaigns. They're things that fundamentally, at a foundational level, have some good in them. And we can see that good in them. And that's why we're sometimes a little bit confused, because there are so many good aspects in some of these movements and other aspects that we're not so sure about. We're like, does this agree with Islam? Does it not agree with Islam? And it causes a lot of confusion for us because we don't know where we stand. What we always want to avoid is a mixed worldview, because having a mixed worldview leads to confusion, and that's not where you want to be. Because if you're confused about your moral understanding of things, and you're having to split between your understanding of things on a moral level and your understanding of your religion, then you're probably in a bad place. You need to be able to combine these two to come to one understanding. So what's the solution to this? As Muslims primarily, and secondarily as Shia, we're expected to have political awareness. As we've already spoken about in this episode, we're awaiting the Imam of our time. So we need to know what the landscape is like for him to reappear into that landscape, and we need to work towards creating that landscape for him. And that is there's a huge aspect of that which is political. And of course, in our history as Shia, we have a lot of events that were political. Of course, these events hold a deep theological importance in our hearts as well. And they are primarily theological events. However, from a secondary perspective, they are also considered to be political events, events like Ghadir, events like the khutbah of Sayyidah Fatima with regards to Fadak, events like the sermon of Sayyidah Zainab in Sham. All of these, all of these events were theological events, but also acted as political events. In order for us to be in line with our religion, this is something that is expected of us. So we do need to be woke in some aspect. But we need to ensure that we're not mixing the worldviews of that which does not agree with Islam and creating confusion in our communities with regards to certain topics and concepts. As Shia, in order to be able to differentiate what are the things that we need to focus on and the things that we don't need to focus on from all these different ideologies that are popping up around the world, we need to look at the goals of the Imam of our time. And how do we get to know the goals of the Imam of our time? It's by familiarizing ourselves with the literature of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Once we've done that, then we can see the direction that the Ahlul Bayt want us to go towards. We can understand the things that we need to be woke in, and some of the stuff that is only going to act as a distraction for us. Of course, in our religion, justice and standing up against oppression are things that we learn from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, and that is expected from us. If there are powerful movements who are making a difference and you can be with them to make a difference, definitely do that. Make sure that you're careful in who you're associating with and you've checked their ideas and got religious advice prior to getting too excited. Alright guys, I hope we've both gained something from this episode. Stay tuned next week where we're going to be talking about Hajj, and we're going to be carrying on our series by Imam al-Hujjah, where we're going to talk about the importance of ma'rifah in the ghaiba. So I'll see you again next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.